Hey everybody, welcome, welcome to Hidden Horror. Thank you for spending this time with me. I appreciate that. Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to Hidden Horror. How are you guys doing? How are you feeling today? How's everything going? I'm doing well, I'm doing great. I'm here today because I want to talk about the bushy eyebrows. Actually, I don't want to talk about the bushy eyebrows at all. I really don't. But I have to talk about it because it is a big part of the evidence in the case. They're trying with circumstantial evidence, they're trying to link Brian Kohlberger to the murders of the Idaho Four. And this is just one way to do it by keep putting on one piece of evidence after another to try to link Brian Kohlberger to the victims, to 1122 King Road at the time of the murders. And one way to do that is to put that idea out there that those bushy eyebrows that allegedly Dylan Mortensen saw, Brian Kohlberger has those bushy eyebrows, right? And that is a way, that is identifier to place him there allegedly. Okay, we don't know. So I'm going to use the word allegedly, but this is what this video is about. Do you think Brian Kohlberger has bushy eyebrows? In the past, I say yes. I think his eyebrows are thick. I have thick eyebrows too. I've told you guys that. I've been stopped. People have offered to arch my eyebrows, to thin my eyebrows. And I'm like, hey, leave me alone. I love myself. I like the way I look. So today we're going to talk all about it. And we're going to start with the hearing. Let's listen to what was said by the defense and the prosecution about allegedly Dylan Mortensen seeing someone in the house, them walking past her allegedly, and one thing that she could identify with is these bushy eyebrows. So let's check this video out. I'm going to share my screen. The video is linked on the Hidden Horror Facebook page. Okay. The video is titled Live Brian Kohlberger, Idaho College Murder Suspect, Pre-Trial Hearing. This is the hearing that was held on April 9th, 2025, where all of those motions were discussed and some decided. This video is by Fox 9 Minneapolis. And we'll start. We move this just a little bit up so we don't have to wait. Starts at about 5:02. Okay.
The video's running? All right. Bushy eyebrows, I think, is next. This is a defense motion.
DM is considered an eyewitness. And eyewitness testimony is some of, if not the most impactful testimony in a trial. The testimony must be subject to close scrutiny before its admission is allowed. We seek that the use of the descriptor, bushy eyebrows, be excluded from use at trial because the witness with this descriptor is completely uncertain of what she remembers, and her description is derived from seeing the intruder for only a second. Whether this court applies Manson-Biggers, which I would say is not completely right on point because there wasn't a photo lineup and there wasn't a show up, or the court considers the science behind memory, the criteria you must look at is what factors influence the accuracy of the memory and make the testimony reliable, because reliability is the linchpin in determining the admissibility of identification testimony. Between Manson-Biggers and the science of memory, there are several factors that are consistently considered, and I'm going to go through a few of those. Factor one, what was the opportunity to see? This is also known as first phase of development of memory or the acquisition phase, and distance, lighting, and duration of exposure are important. DM is uncertain about the lighting. The stairs to her left were not lit. The kitchen may or may not have been lit. And the twinkle lights in the living room may have been lit. She described seeing the person for, quote, only a second, end quote. The person may have been 3 feet from her, or he may have been walking to exit out the back sliding glass door. The back door is further than 3 feet from her door and is not visible from where she was standing. We submitted 2 pictures as our exhibits to show you the vantage point of where she was standing in her bedroom. Her opportunity to see supports unreliability. Factor 2, the witness's degree of attention. This is where amount of alcohol has a significant impact on the analysis. She described herself as, quote, probably very drunk, and given the amount of alcohol she told law enforcement about consuming the entire day, that makes sense. She started with champagne mimosas in the morning, then White Claws 9 to 10 throughout the day. Then that night before she got home, she was involved in a drinking game and drank Borg, which is hard alcohol and flavoring. Her degree of attention, given this, supports unreliability. Factor 3, the accuracy of the description. Her description is that she saw a person wearing all black, not insanely tall. She doesn't know if she saw lips and nose. She is certain he is white. She never mentions eyebrows herself initially. The person who asked about eyebrows was law enforcement. In her second interview, Detective Mowry asked her if she saw the eyes, saw eyebrows. She never said anything about bushy eyebrows. Then in her third interview with Detective Gooch, she said she didn't know what the eyes looked like or the color of the eyebrows. That's for the first time that she mentioned bushy eyebrows. This lack of accuracy supports unreliability. Factor 4, what is the level of certainty of the witness? In each of the 5 interviews, she says over and over again, she doesn't know if anything she says is accurate because she felt like she was in a dream state, frozen shock, fuzzy and cloudy, like wearing blurry glasses, influenced by alcohol, and sleepy. She has an absolute lack of certainty. This supports unreliability. Factor 5, the science of memory looks to confabulation. When the acquisition of memory, the first factor that I talked about is impacted by emotion and stress. In this case, that is an important consideration. Confabulation is defined as the creation or substitution of false memories through later suggestions that fill in the gaps of missing memory. DM expresses in each interview how she was afraid and did not know what she was hearing, and also contradicts this when she thought everything was, quote, okay, and XK was simply just passed out on the floor. Later suggestion under this definition of confabulation is Detective Mowry asking her about eyebrows and each law enforcement officer, then reinforcing that in each interview. She never used the word balaclava, yet Detective Gooch asked her if she had ever heard of one, explained what one was and that it's used to hide identity, showed her a picture of one, and then had her draw one. This is law enforcement filling in the gaps. This also impacts the last factor, which is factor 6, post-event misinformation effect impacting retained information, exposure to subsequent information. Law enforcement, upon initial appearance at the scene, did not ever break up all of the people that were there. They then go to the police station, and after that, on the night of November 13th, those that were at the house when law enforcement arrived stayed together in a hotel room. So the DM was basically together with other witnesses from the time that when they first called friends to come to the house, before they called law enforcement, all the way through the night. She was interviewed twice by law enforcement. That created this exposure to bushy eyebrows. And then that term was used in the probable cause affidavit, and the media seized upon it from the very beginning, causing post-event exposure, which affects how DM's memory is retained. This factor supports unreliability. When you look at all of these factors, or the totality of the circumstances, the way the state argues it, the linchpin, the reliability is not there. The state wants to bolster a person who admittedly has no clear memory with a photo of Mr. Koberger to say, this is the person she identified. DM told police that she looked at Mr. Koberger's arrest picture and did not recognize him. The state cannot run around her unreliability by entering into evidence a photo to show it's a person that she says she cannot identify, because the state's interpretation is that Mr. Koberger's photo shows bushy eyebrows. That is misleading to the jury. It will confuse the jury. It will be putting words into the mouth of DM that do not exist. While they might not seek to do that on the stand with her by admitting a photo through her testimony off of his phone, if they make the argument in an opening statement that that description of bushy eyebrows is supported by a photo taken on his phone the next day, that kind of prejudice is beyond repair. The state also claims that because DM draws pictures of eyes and eyebrows, she is more reliable in her identification of them. But that is not the way law enforcement appeared to have viewed the artwork as they photographed it and reported on it. Given the science of memory and its acquisition, retention, and retrieval, this could be what is filling in her memory gaps as opposed to actual memory. When you apply the critical factors that a court must take into consideration for eyewitness testimony regarding identification, the words bushy eyebrows should be excluded. The heart of the issue is whether or not the witness is reliable enough on the issue to let the words be spoken to the jury when it comes to the description. DM said that she could not do a composite sketch because she doesn't think she saw a face. The court should enter an order excluding the words. Thank you.
just want to pause it here. Some time ago, I did a video relating to the Idaho 4, talking about eyewitness testimony and how unreliable it is, and how we've had so many cases where a person has been convicted and their conviction has been overturned primarily due to eyewitness testimony. So in my opinion, I think the defense made excellent arguments regarding the fact that eyewitness testimony, particularly when it's a trauma such as this, a quadruple murder, is not reliable. It's been proven, it's been shown. The majority of the convictions have been overturned for eyewitness testimony. It's just not reliable. It's not accurate. And a person can, like she said, the suggestion, you show someone something, now they've taken that on as what they believe happened, what they believe is a recall of a memory, okay? So I agree with the defense. I'm not surprised about Judge Hippler's ruling. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but if you look at his body language, he's like this, he's like this. He does not want to be here. It's very offensive. I don't know if the defense is going to address it at some point, maybe feeling like there is some bias there, but he definitely is leaking out in his body language how he feels about this case. Really unfortunate, but let's continue. Let's hear what the prosecution has to say about the bushy eyebrows.
The defendant relies on the Manson-Biggers test. We just went through the 5-factor balancing test for the argument. However, that test is completely inapplicable in this case. Manson-Biggers has to do when there's a law enforcement-led identification process. The concern is that through suggestive techniques by law enforcement, it could lead to or create a misidentification. Well, that didn't happen in this case because it couldn't happen in this case. The male DM saw that night was covered head to toe. The only thing that was uncovered was a portion of his face. That does not lend itself to positively identifying any particular person. Therefore, an identification procedure was not used, and that Manson-Biggers test is inapplicable. Instead, on 4 separate occasions before Brian Kohberger was even identified or arrested, DM gave consistent descriptions of the male she saw in the residence that night at around 4 a.m. Every time she described this person as being white, male, wearing all black, a few inches taller than her, she's 5'10", wearing a mask, skinny, athletic, tone build, and not a voice that she recognized. During 3 of those interviews, she then describes the male's eyebrows, and she describes them as being bushy. Obviously, there was some focus on the eyes or the eyebrows by investigators because this is the only portion that she could see. She never wavers in her description of the person that she saw. She's very clear about what she does remember and what she doesn't remember. Defense put the state of Mr. Kohberger's eyebrows into question. In an attempt to discredit DM's testimony or description, they wrote, "Mr. Kohberger does not have bushy eyebrows, but the artwork on DM's walls and the way she draws eyes and eyebrows could be described as bushy, full, or prominent." So in response, the state attached a picture of Mr. Kohberger, and obviously that's a jury question, but it was taken only hours after the homicide, so the closest in time to when DM would have seen the smell. And we did this in order.
Let me pause and show you the picture that she's referring to. Let me see if I can get this picture up. So this is the picture that she's referring to, the selfie picture. I'll let this sit for about 10 seconds so you can. This is the picture here that she's referring to with the bushy eyebrows. This picture allegedly was taken about 10:31 a.m. on November 13th, 2022. Allegedly, this picture was in Brian Kohlberger's cell phone. Okay. Okay, let's continue.
In order to, when we did apply the Manson-Biggers test, to show that it turned out to be accurate. Corroboration does not equal prejudice. The state doesn't intend to introduce, they're correct. We would not introduce that photograph through DM. We would attempt to introduce that photograph and plan on laying the proper foundation and relevancy at trial. There's no grounds to exclude this testimony. DM's the only living individual who saw the person responsible for these 4 homicides. Her description of the male, including any characteristic.
I want to pause it here. So what she's saying, she's trying to attach what Dylan Mortensen said she saw with the killer or killers of Kaylee, Maddie, Ethan, and Xana. Dylan Mortensen never said that the male that she allegedly saw was the killer. She never said she saw blood on the clothing of this male. She never said that she saw a weapon, a knife, any type of object that the male she saw was carrying. She never said she saw a bag, a backpack, anything like that. So the prosecution, if you listen closely, they're connecting this alleged male that Dylan says she saw and tying it to the murders and saying this is the killer, okay? Just a clever move. I wonder if I can back it up like 10 seconds. Okay. Let's play it so you can hear it
such as
again.
bushy eyebrows is relevant to the identity of the killer. It is prejudicial, but it's not unfair. A jury should hear this evidence, and the state asks that the court rule accordingly. Thank you.
I need to pause it because I think I passed up the words. So let me see if I can go back like a little bit. My apologies.
The defendant relies on the Manson-Biggers test. We just went through the 5-factor balancing test for their argument. However, that test is completely inapplicable in this case. Manson-Biggers has to do when there's a law enforcement-led identification process. The concern is that through suggestive techniques by law enforcement, it could lead to or create a misidentification. Well, that didn't happen in this case because it couldn't happen in this case. The male DM saw that night was covered head to toe. The only thing that was uncovered was a portion of his face. That does not lend itself to positively identifying any particular person. Therefore, an identification procedure was not used, and that Manson-Biggers test is inapplicable. Instead, on 4 separate occasions before Brian Kohlberger was even identified or arrested, DM gave consistent descriptions of the male she saw in the residence that night at around 4 a.m. Every time she described this person as being white, male, wearing all black, a few inches taller than her, she's 5'10", wearing a mask, skinny, athletic, toned build, and not a voice that she recognized. During 3 of those interviews, she then describes the male's eyebrows, and she describes them as being bushy. Obviously, there was some focus on the eyes or the eyebrows by investigators because this is the only portion that she could see. She never wavers in her description of the person that she saw. She's very clear about what she does remember and what she doesn't remember. Defense put the state of Mr. Koberger's eyebrows into question. In an attempt to discredit DM's testimony or description, they wrote, Mr. Koberger does not have bushy eyebrows, but the artwork on DM's walls and the way she draws eyes and eyebrows could be described as bushy, full, or prominent. So in response, the state attached a picture of Mr. Koberger, and obviously that's a jury question, but it was taken only hours after the homicide, so the closest in time to when DM would have seen the smell. And we did this in order to, when we did apply the Manson-Biggers test, to show that it turned out to be accurate. Corroboration does not equal prejudice. The state doesn't intend to introduce, they're correct. We would not introduce that photograph through DM. We would attempt to introduce that photograph and plan on laying the proper foundation and relevancy at trial. There's no grounds to exclude this testimony. DM's the only living individual who saw the person responsible for these 4 homicides. Her description of the male, including any characteristics such as bushy eyebrows, is relevant to the identity of the killer. It is prejudicial, but it's not unfair. A jury should hear this evidence, and the state asks that the court rule accordingly. Thank you.
I'll be brief, but I want to circle back to where I started. To say that there's no grounds to exclude this testimony is completely inaccurate because, in fact, there is a large body of case law and a large body of science about how important this testimony is. And that's why this court must analyze the reliability going through all of the factors that I expressed. And there is not certainty with DM in what she saw. And the court now has, over a variety of motions, all of the transcripts that you can look at to understand the amount of uncertainty that she expressed.
Thank you. Well, I'll take that issue under advisement.
Okay, so you heard Judge Hippler. Judge Hippler is saying, hey, I'll take it under advisement. Well, now we have a ruling by Judge Hippler. We're going to go to our article. The article is by Newsweek.com. It's titled Brian Koberger Case, Judge Rules. Roommate can testify about key detail. It's dated April 18, 2025, and it's by Xana Kernodle. A judge presiding over the case involving accused University of Idaho killer Brian Koberger, they're actually titling him as the killer. Okay, that's really scary, but let's continue. A judge presiding over the case involving accused University of Idaho killer Brian Koberger has ruled that a surviving roommate can testify about seeing an intruder with bushy eyebrows inside the house the night of the murders. So they're labeling the male that DM allegedly saw as an intruder now. You know, we got to be careful about the use of our words, be careful. Okay, it says Newsweek reached out to Koberger's lawyers via email Friday for comment, but of course we know there's a gag order, they can't respond, okay? Koberger, 30, is accused of fatally stabbing Kaylee Gonclaves, 21, Madison Mogen, 21, Ethan Chapin, 20, and Xana Kernodle, 20, in an off-campus residence in Moscow, Idaho, on November 13, 2022. 2 roommates at the residence, Bethany Funk and Dylan Mortensen, were unharmed in the attack. Koberger is charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. He has pleaded not guilty in the death penalty-eligible case and is set to stand trial in August. Meanwhile, the college student's death sparked outrage and consumed social media for months in the aftermath as the case unfolded. In a Friday order, District Judge Stephen Hippler said that DM's testimony about bushy eyebrows is highly relevant in this case. DM is the only eyewitness to the intruder responsible for the homicides. It is the jury's task to determine whether the defendant is that person. The judge added that her testimony regarding the key detail about the intruder has been consistent and clear despite not being able to provide enough detail to create a composite sketch. DM noted that the intruder was wearing a mask, and the judge said not being able to provide enough for a sketch is unsurprising. The judge concluded by denying Kohlberger's lawyer's request about the specific testimony, adding, "This is matter for cross-examination by defendant, and any concerns with DM's ability to perceive and remember what she claims she saw may be tested in that manner." So what Judge Hippler is saying is you have the ability to cross-examine Dylan Mortensen. You can question her. You can address the issues of memory. You can address the issues of being intoxicated, whatever drink she had that day. We all know that this eyewitness testimony may be unreliable and you have to attack it, right? So he's saying you're going to have to do that by cross-examination. I'm not going to throw out what she said she saw. Kohlberger's defense has also argued to strike the death penalty from the case, citing Kohlberger's alleged ASD, autism spectrum disorder. In a court filing last month, the state argued against removing the death penalty, saying in part, defendant argues that it will violate the Eighth Amendment's prohibition on cruel and unusual punishment to impose a sentence of death because he has ASD. His argument fails for multiple independent reasons. I'm not going to really talk about that so much with the death penalty. Right now, they're not acknowledging the ASD. They're pretty much going to say that it's alleged, and because Brian Kohlberger is high functioning, that he's educated, that he's been able to live independently, that's not going to have an impact. And also, jurors are always directed to not consider anything, only the testimony, only the evidence. So pretty much don't consider his abilities, his behaviors, his mannerisms, how he looks, if he's staring, if he's being still. You know, that is not evidence. That's not evidence of guilt. That's not testimony, of course. So don't consider it. Okay. Mortensen told police the most descriptive information since she encountered the suspected killer on his way out of the house. Mortensen opened her bedroom door on the second floor of the house several times shortly after 4 a.m. Mortensen told police she was awoken by what she thought was Gonclaves playing with her dog in one of the third floor bedrooms. Later on, Mortensen said she thought she heard Gonclaves say something along the lines of, "There is someone here." Mortensen peeked out of her bedroom again when she thought she heard crying from Kernodle's room and a male voice saying something sounding like, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." So allegedly she's hearing Kaylee's voice, and Kaylee was situated on the third floor. And then allegedly she's hearing crying from Xana Kernodle, and Xana was on the second floor. Now, she's saying that she heard a male's voice saying something to the effect of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." So she's hearing a lot of things. Now, we know from the release of the texting and the data that was downloaded from Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Funk's phone that she was not awoken at 4 a.m. We know that Dylan Mortensen was already up prior to 4 a.m. because she was entering a contact on her cell phone at 3:51 a.m. So this was prior to, which lets us know she was already woke. Okay. When Mortensen opened her door a third time, she saw a male figure clad in black clothing and wearing a mask over his mouth and nose. Now, again, I've said this from the beginning. Clad in black doesn't sound like someone that's young, youthful would say. It sounds like words from law enforcement. But overall, they're saying that she allegedly saw someone in black clothing wearing a mask. Now, this is 2022, so we know that there was still some COVID restrictions. People were still wearing masks and all of that. Okay, let's continue. Mortensen told police that she stood in a frozen shock phase as the figure walked past her and out the sliding door that allowed access to the second and third floor bedrooms. She described the man as having bushy eyebrows. Now, I've done a whole video talking about the frozen shock phase. You know, what did that mean? Was she in a frozen shock phase? And pretty much it does not sound like she was. And we know the history of the exchanges between Bethany Funk, Dylan Mortensen, and also the activity on the phones, the texting, the taking of the pictures, the Snapchat use. It did not appear that she was that Dylan Mortensen was in a frozen shock phase. And also the statement about the figure walked past her and out the sliding door. Well, where was she standing? Because if you look at the layout of the house, Dylan Mortensen's bedroom is not near that area, near the kitchen, so close that the killer would walk past her. And remember, they found a latent footprint outside of her bedroom, so we really don't know the placement. So that's like another question there, right? Let's continue. Former FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, who is not connected to the case, previously told Newsweek that Mortensen's information was important to the investigation. She gives us insight as to the girls, meaning Maddie and Kaylee, being killed first, and then Xana and Ethan later. Coffindaffer said it makes it clear from her timelines and the reflections of what she shared, and of course what she saw. So that is very dangerous to say, the order of the killings. We don't know who was killed, if we want to say first or second or third or fourth. As I have expressed to you, I do believe that Kaylee and Maddie were killed at the same time, at the time they both were being attacked. I am not sure, it is not clear to me, it's not certain to me that Kaylee and Maddie were killed inside the house or at the house, as well as Xana and Ethan. I feel that they were killed at the same time. I don't necessarily believe it was at the house or in the house. I believe that they were killed earlier in the evening, late into the night, and I believe they were killed before Kaylee and Maddie, but I don't think they were killed necessarily during the same parts of the attack. Like if the attack started on the second floor and went to the third floor, or started on the third floor, went to the second floor. I don't think so. I think they were killed for different reasons. Just from information that I've learned over these 2.5 years almost, I don't think they were killed for the same reasons, and that's my opinion. Let me know what you think. Do you think that Kaylee and Maddie were killed at the house 1122 King Road? Do you think that Xana and Ethan were killed at the house 1122 King Road? Do you think the same person or people killed all of them, or do you think they were killed separately? Excuse me. It's just my thoughts, my opinions. It seems that it's very hard to figure out the whereabouts of Ethan and Xana after 9 p.m., 8 p.m. I did see a video of them going into like an apartment on the first floor, Xana and Ethan, about 12:30 p.m. So I don't know what happened to them after that, but there was a video of them getting out of the car with other people, maybe a group of 4 or 5, and they were going into like a first floor apartment. Can't find that video. A lot of videos have been scrubbed off the internet since this case has unfolded, but let's continue on. Coffindaffer said Mortensen's eyewitness account to the suspect also alerted investigators that there was one male perpetrator. Well, you can't say that. We don't even know if this person is the suspect, and we don't know if it's one male perpetrator. We have to look at the evidence. And again, the evidence tells me that there were 2 or more killers. The reason I think that is because Kaylee and Maddie, they were killed by stabbing, allegedly. And then Xana was killed by a edged weapon. And Ethan allegedly was killed with a blunt force injury. So I believe it could be 2 or 3 killers. And I also think that it shows why we have so much unknown male DNA. We have the 3 male mixture of unknown male DNA under Madison Mogen's fingernails. We have the unknown male DNA on the glove, and then we have the unknown male blood on the hand railing. So I believe there are 2 to 3 killers, in my opinion. But I'm going to keep going. Mortensen dialed down all those questions, one perpetrator, a male perpetrator, and gave a general description matching Brian Kohlberger, Kofendaffer said. Well, again, I'll give you another piece of information that does not lend that Brian Kohlberger is the killer or the only killer. And the reason I say that is because he didn't have any defensive wounds. And we've seen pictures of Brian Kohlberger when he was arrested. We've seen the selfie of him. He doesn't have any scratches, cuts, abrasions. If Kaylee and Xana allegedly had defensive wounds, we should see those defensive wounds. That means that they were fighting back against their attacker or attackers. And that person probably was scratched, probably was hit, probably had some torn skin, scratches on the face, the neck, the chest, the arms, etc. Brian Kohlberger doesn't have any of that, so it makes me think that either he is not the killer or there were multiple killers, right? In my opinion. Let's continue on. Judge Stephen Hippler, in part, in his Friday order, although she might have been intoxicated or tired or questioned her memory, the consistency of her description suggests high degree of reliability. While defendant may cross-examine DM about his concerns with her memory, his challenges to her competency and personal knowledge as basis for exclusion are unfounded. Legal analyst Nima Ramani, in a post on X, formerly Twitter, last month, the biggest trials of 2025 are happening soon. Diddy may be the biggest, but Brian Kohlberger is right there. There hasn't been a lot of evidence made public in the University of Idaho murders case because of the very broad, I think too broad, gag order, and the parties, I think inappropriately, filing everything under seal. But the evidence is starting to trickle out, and we recently heard the 911 call of the surviving roommates who found the bodies. I did a video on the 911 call, basically expressing the call does not make any sense. Nobody mentions blood. Nobody mentions a stabbing. Nobody mentions cuts. They're saying that Xana Kernodle is pretty much passed out. If this was a bloody crime scene, a heinous crime scene, a crime scene as described, very shocking for officers that have been on the force 20, 30 years. This does not equate to what is described on the 911 call. No one mentions blood at all, let alone if someone's throat is cut, possibly, fingers cut off, possibly cuts on the arms, in the chest. No one says any of that. So I don't believe the 911 call. I think it's a ruse of fake, a patsy, if you will. Let's continue. The jury trial is scheduled for August 11, 2025 at 8:30 a.m. at the Ada County Courthouse. The trial is expected to end in November of 2025. So please, everyone, let me know what you think. Number one, do you think Brian Kohlberger has bushy eyebrows? Number two, do you think that Dylan Mortensen's recall of what happened is reliable? Is her saying that the suspect or the person that was in the house, the male allegedly that was in the house, that he had bushy eyebrows? Do you believe her? Do you think that's accurate? And number three, overall, do you think that comment about the bushy eyebrows, should that be allowed into evidence? Me personally, overall, I do think the eyewitness testimony is unreliable, but in this case, I think it should be allowed because she said it. She said it was her own idea. She did not identify Brian Kohlberger as a suspect. She didn't have enough information to do a makeup, a drawing of a potential suspect. She didn't know. I think she was trying to be ambiguous. So let it go. Cross-examine her. See if she is reliable, if her thoughts will stand. That's all you can do. That's all you can do, in my opinion, is cross-examine her, which I think is a good thing. Either she will stand on what she remembers and what she said she saw, or she will crumble. But either way, we need to find the truth out. We need to find who did this to these 4 victims, okay? Let me know your thoughts, and thank you for spending this time with me. I really, really appreciate it. I want you to stay safe, stay smart, stay savvy. Be well, all my friends. Bye, everybody.